Okay, good evening. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Good to see everyone who's here in person, enjoying all the delicious goodies. And for those who are online, you could be enjoying the delicious goodies if you were here in person. But in the spirit of enjoying delicious goodies, grab a l'chaim at home and a little pastry or something and have a bite. That's the custom. Jews get together, unless it's Yom Kippur. We're supposed to be eating and enjoying and, celebrating. So, welcome back to another year of the Jewish Learning Institute. It looks like most of you are veterans of this program, although we do have a couple of new faces. So, a warm welcome to those who are freshies at the JLI program. The Jewish Learning Institute is the largest Jewish adult education program in the world, with over 400 locations that are this week starting this incredible course. Here in Northridge, we are starting our 21st year of JLI programs, which means we've taught over 60 of these courses. And it's an absolute privilege every single time to see all of the incredible people who give up such important things in order to come and to spend time learning, listening, being inspired, sharing, and just connecting with our beautiful traditions. Tonight, we are starting a very, very important and beautiful topic. Tonight's topic is the Kabbalah of Meaning. We're starting this amazing course, and I'd like to recall the Torah portion of last week. Every week, the Jewish people, we read a portion of the Torah. We live with the times, not with the news of the day necessarily. The times for the Jewish people are the weekly Torah portions. And so last week, we began living with an incredible Jew in our history whose name was Abraham, who together with his wife, Sarah, started the Jewish people. And interestingly enough, strangely enough, although Abraham and his wife went through many incredible experiences in their youth, including discovering God, committing themselves to what would later become Judaism, risking their lives in order to teach this to others, none of this is mentioned as the opening act of Abraham. What is the opening act of Abraham? What is the opening verse where the Torah introduces us to Abraham? What does it say? Who remembers? Lech lecha, the name of last week's Torah portion, as Mark just translated. Go forth. And I'm sure the King James Bible says, go ye forth. Go forward. Lech lecha, go. You should march forward. You should leave your birthplace, leave that which you are used to, and march forward. In this case, go to the land of Israel. Our commentaries point out, Lech lecha also means go, journey to yourself. Go and discover yourself. Okay? And that really is the mandate of the Jewish people, and by extension of all humanity. We are to go out and to discover our true self and to try to live life aligned with who we truly are. And that's why we are introduced to Abraham with those words, because that is the most important task of every single human being. When we talk about tikkun olam, improving the world, making the world brighter, it begins with the thing that we have the most control over, with our world. You know, there's a great story. There was one time a Polish nobleman heard that a great rabbi was coming to town. And he heard that this rabbi is different than all the rabbis that the Polish nobleman was used to. The Polish nobleman knew there were rabbis of shtetl, of little cities, and then there were regional rabbis, and then you could have a rabbi of a big city, and then there's even the chief rabbi of Poland. And this rabbi is what's known as a rebbe. He was just like an inspirational figure that thousands of people turn to for inspiration. And this Polish individual is trying to figure out, what is this creature? What is this rabbi? And he's told, this is an uber rabbiner. This is a great overarching rabbi. So he meets the rabbi and he says to the rabbi, I've heard about you, but I'm trying to figure out who you are. What are you and what do you do? And the rabbi says as follows, and listen to this not just with your ears, listen with your hearts. The rabbi says, a rabbi of a shtetl, a little town, is in charge of the entire town. A rabbi of a large community is in charge of the community. A rabbi of a large city is in charge of the entire city. A rabbi of the country of Poland, a chief rabbi, is in charge of the entire country. An uber rabbiner, I am responsible for myself. I try to be in charge of myself. What was he saying? What was he saying? That sometimes it's easier to control an entire country than to be in charge of yourself, right? So lech lecha means turn inward. Find yourself and live meaningfully aligned with who you truly are. Go forth and find meaning and purpose in your human life. Now, what's interesting is when we talk about meaning, so on the one hand, we live in incredible times. Health, wealth, longevity, stability. I know that everyone goes crazy about an election that may have gone wrong, or about a couple of terrorists running around in different parts of the world. But compared to the terror and world war that most human beings dealt with over the millennia, we live in very stable times. We live in very peaceful times. We live in incredible times. Human beings should be the happiest and most secure and just living lives of inner peace. And yet we find that for many people, meaning and the sense of peace and happiness that ensues is more elusive than ever. And I want to just emphasize that word, because although this is not a course, this is not the Kabbalah of happiness, that was a couple of years ago, but there is a direct link between happiness and meaning, because happiness is not pursued, although we live in a country that's all about the pursuit of happiness. The more you pursue happiness, the more the happiness runs away from you. Happiness ensues when you have meaning in your life. So that's what we're going to try to explore over the next 6 weeks. Now, I just want to note, we talked about meaning. The course is called the Kabbalah of Meaning. Many people, when they hear the word Kabbalah, they think of esoteric texts, often in riddle form, that have to be interpreted, deep meditation, focusing on souls and angels, and certainly that is very much what Kabbalah means. You open up a Sefer Kabbalah, a book of the Zohar, a book of the Arizal, that's certainly what you'll find. But Kabbalah is also about taking the stories, the laws, the teachings of Judaism beyond their literal form and exploring them in the esoteric and metaphoric realm. And the purpose of that exploration is to derive lessons, practical lessons in life from those teachings. And that's also a form of Kabbalah. That's also a form of mystical tradition of Judaism. In fact, it's a very practical Kabbalah. It's about taking the mystical teachings and making them real and practical in your life. And that's the style of this course. You may recall at the beginning of, I think it was 2 years ago, we had a real intense Kabbalah course. We went through the Seder Ishtalshelus, the process of spiritual evolution. It was a great experience. It was beautiful. The next 6 weeks is much more practical Kabbalah, practical Jewish spirituality. So let's talk about meaning. For meaning, we'll start with the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech, of King Solomon. King Solomon, of course, is one of the kings of the Jewish people. He was the third king after King Saul, his son-in-law, King David. And King David was succeeded by his son, King Solomon. Shlomo HaMelech, known as the wisest of men, the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem, an incredible, incredible person. King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, writes 3 books. One he writes in his youth, and it's all about love and romance and relationships, and it's a metaphor for the relationship between God and the Jewish people. What is that book called? Song of Songs, in Hebrew, Shir HaShirim, one of the holiest books of the Torah. In his adult life, he wrote a book called Mishlei, the Parables of King Solomon, which is ideas of how to live life, living life in this world, practical teachings in this world. For example, he talks about the borrower is the slave to the lender, a very famous teaching of King Solomon that all the financial planners like to talk about. Okay? In his older age, he began to see his own mortality, and he writes a book known as Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. I have no idea what Ecclesiastes means, but it means Kohelet. It means Kohelet. Okay? And what is Kohelet? Kohelet is 12 chapters of King Solomon searching for meaning in life, and at times expressing the futility of the search. And let's look at one of his expressions of this futility in text number 1, page 3. You can open up your booklets. For those of you that are online, I posted the link to the textbook in the chat box of the Zoom. You can have a look at it. King Solomon writes as follows, Ecclesiastes chapter 11. He's getting towards the end of the book. The words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Futility of futility, said Kohelet. Futility of futilities, all is futile. What profit has man in all his toil that he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but only the earth endures forever. So King Solomon is expressing this self-reflective sense that only human beings have, where we get this sense of trying to find something that is meaningful and long-lasting, and he's facing his own mortality, and he says only the earth which swallows us all endures. You know, we have the ability as humans to not just think about how to survive, but to think about why we survive, not just how we live, which is what all living creatures do, how to live, try to figure out how to live, but why to live. That's a uniquely human endeavor, to be self-reflective. And it's a very, very difficult human endeavor because very often we feel that the sense of meaning and purpose is forever elusive. Carl Jung says, you have the quote up on the screen, about a third of my cases are not suffering from any clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and aimlessness of their lives. A feeling of meaninglessness is causing the various psychological issues that his patients were dealing with. Or in the words of, we have here text number 2. Let's see, where's text number 2? Page 3 at the bottom, text number 2 from a more modern psychology perspective, a little bit of the data of what's happening today in the world. Don't worry, we're not just going to focus on the negative, we're going to get positive as well, okay? But it's very interesting to see depression, anxiety, and substance abuse have reached epidemic proportions globally. This is written in 2021. In 2017, 66.6 million Americans, more than half of respondents on the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, reported binge drinking within the past month. I'm not sure if Kiddush is included. And 20 million met the criteria for substance use disorder. 31% of American adults will develop a full-blown anxiety disorder at some point in their lives, and 19% in any given year. The WHO reports that 264 million people on the planet are depressed. Depression is the third most costly disability worldwide. Each year, 17 million American adults are depressed. Over 16% of youth and late adolescents currently face depression. And the impact of depression on suicide accounts for the second leading cause of death in adolescence, rivaled only by death by auto accident. While the stakes of our mental health crisis are truly life and death, many of us also suffer from less debilitating, though still painful conditions: burnout and chronic stress, trouble concentrating and connecting, loneliness and isolation, lives that are rich in many ways, yet feel somehow narrow, hollow, and cut off. Even when we experience success and satisfaction, we may sense that there's more to happiness, that life could be more joyful, rewarding, and meaningful. They bring here in one of the footnotes, the JLI brings, that interestingly enough, these challenges are found even more by higher worth families, higher worth individuals. You would think that's counterintuitive. The more you have, the more happy you are. Interestingly enough, it seems that when you're not distracted by surviving, you think about why I should survive. What's the purpose of it all? If a person is struggling to live, they focus on getting the next meal. But when you're not focusing on getting the next meal, you have more time to think, and you begin to count on what you have and the experiences and the pleasures that it can buy you, that it can purchase. You count on that for happiness and for meaning, and when that is elusive, it's very, very depressing. In the words of Viktor Frankl, again up on the screen, even more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. So this endeavor to find meaning, practical coaching, practical ideas, things that we can take home today of how to find more meaning in life, how to attain more meaning, which will translate into meaningful happiness. That is what we're hoping to accomplish over the next 6 weeks, starting this evening. And not surprisingly, the Torah, and specifically the teachings of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, has much to say when we talk about living a meaningful life and the ensuing inner happiness. Okay? Let's begin with finding your pens. Let's do a little exercise because it's important to make a differentiation or to clarify within our own minds what is the difference between pleasure and meaning. Pleasure, if something is pleasurable or something is meaningful. Now we have 3 questions here. No one's going to force you to share these answers, although I'd love to hear perhaps if somebody wants to volunteer. But the 3 questions are, this is on page 6, describe at least one activity that brings you pleasure and that you find meaningful. Describe at least one activity that brings you pleasure, but which you do not find meaningful. Describe at least one activity that you find meaningful, but which does not bring you pleasure. Okay, go ahead, take a couple of minutes and fill these out, and maybe some of you will be brave enough to share what you wrote. Again, we're on page 6. For those that are sitting all the way in the back, unless you like distance, there's empty seats up here in the front. You could be in spitting distance of the rabbi. Okay. Would anyone like to share some of the examples? Go ahead. Danielle, what do you got for us? Which one?
Activity that brings me pleasure and I find meaningful is rapping to me. A activity that brings me pleasure but I do not find meaningful would be like earning money. And
So I want to just understand something. I'm just gonna stop you for a second. What about wrapping tefillin is pleasurable? I know that it's meaningful, but what's pleasurable?
connection with God,
Okay.
probably, and it's just the feeling he gives me. I feel good.
Okay. All right. Amazing. More power to you. I'll have to learn more with you. I'll have to figure out how that works. Okay.
For the stuff that brings me pleasure, but it's not meaningful, I don't make money or shooting. And then
now, why are those not meaningful? With money, you can do good things. You can help other people. You can support worthy causes. With shooting, you can protect yourself. Spiritual. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. And then anything for the third?
His brother gave me an example, and the example we came up with is fasting.
Fasting. It's meaningful. It's not pleasure. Fair. Good. Good. Okay. Very good. Any others? Yes, Alex.
Great. So we did. First one was being with family.
Being with family, meaningful and pleasurable. Beautiful. Okay.
Second one is being on TikTok or social media.
Okay. There's a dopamine experience, but it's not very meaningful. Okay, good.
Third one is chores.
Okay.
Dusting, cleaning.
Right.
Laundry.
It's important, it's meaningful, you have a clean house, but it's not pleasurable. Fair enough. Okay, good. Any others? Any others? Yes, Ken. Learning is meaningful and pleasurable. Okay, good.
Football.
Okay. Okay, some people would find that very meaningful. Some people would find that meaningful. So you like fasting. So you like fasting. It's pleasurable. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, all right. Maybe we'll take one more. Yeah, David, some examples.
First question, your daughter being in good health, both mentally and physically.
Okay.
And second one is breaking fast.
Breaking fast is pleasurable but not meaningful. Okay, fine. Fasting. Okay, very good. All right, we have some very good examples here. All right. Now, it's interesting. On a very individual level, it's clear that when you talk about meaning, something is meaningful when it's an expression of yourself, right? Self-expression, when there's something that expresses who you are, like maybe the tefillin, right? The reason why it's meaningful is because this is who I am, right? You could imagine for someone who doesn't know what tefillin is, or I'll give another example, right? Someone goes to Israel, but they have no idea what Israel is, what it means, what these places are. It's a bunch of piles of rocks and stones and sand, and it's like, what's so amazing about this place, right? It's meaningful when it's an expression of yourself, right? On a very basic level, if you have an artist, if a person is very artistic, and you put them behind a desk and they have to punch in data, that's not going to be very meaningful. If they're being artistic, then it's an expression of self, and it can be a meaningful experience, right? A nurturing person finds pleasure and meaning in being nurturing. They might get a job as a nurse or taking care of others, right? And we're going to delve into the importance of self-awareness and really figuring out who you are as an individual and self-expression. And we're going to delve into that in lesson number 3. That's going to be the focus of lesson number 3. What we're going to focus on tonight is in a more general sense. The Torah has some general ideas for the Jewish people in particular, and by extension for all of humanity, that all healthy humans have a general internal core and experience, and through healthy alignment, meaningful pleasure and happiness that ensues through certain behaviors and activities. Meaning every person has who they are on the inside. And when you are aligned with who you are on the inside through behaviors that express who you are in your core, that brings about a sense of happiness and pleasure. And so the first step, Judaism tells us, in finding meaning in life is figuring out who we are. What is a human being? What are we? What makes a person unique? And as such, what is meaningful human self-expression? So interestingly enough, to figure out what humans are, we're going to turn to the non-human kingdom. Because the Torah tells us that we are compared to something which is not human. Let me ask you a question. When is the Jewish New Year? When is the Jewish New Year? When do we celebrate? September. What's it called? Rosh Hashanah. Excellent. Okay, that's the New Year for people. Okay. Does anybody know when is the New Year for grains and vegetables? Nobody knows. Okay. When is the New Year for kings? When does a king's New Year begin, according to Judaism? Nobody knows. Okay, fair enough. Dr. Selsky, you learned Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Come on. There's 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Rabbi Engel would be very disappointed. When is the New Year for trees? Anybody knows? Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat. Now, why do you know about the trees, but you don't know about the kings, and you don't know about the grains and the vegetables? Okay, but Miriam, who didn't go to Dr. Salsky's class, knew about Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is when we celebrate, the 15th of Shvat is when we celebrate the New Year for trees. You go to Israel, they have songs, Tu B'Shvat Higia, Chag La'ilanot, it's a celebration of the trees. We plant trees, we eat the fruits of Israel, it's a celebration of trees. Why are human beings celebrating a New Year for trees? Good question. The answer is because the Torah tells us about a comparison between people and trees. Let's see it inside. Okay, this is in the book of Deuteronomy, text number 3, page 7. The Torah is talking about the laws of war. In general, Jews are to avoid destroying unnecessarily and being wasteful. There is a prohibition in the Torah called bal tashlis. You shouldn't destroy anything unnecessarily. So it's a pretty serious prohibition, including, for example, if you're walking down the street, just to randomly grab a leaf for no reason, rip it off the tree and crumble it onto the ground, unless there's a purpose, is something which the Torah discourages us from doing. Obviously, destroying things that are more meaningful is prohibited. The context of this prohibition is even in war. Even when you go to war and you have to lay siege on the city in order to starve out the enemy, which is something that is normal for people to do if they're fighting normal wars, not with the UN breathing down their back. So the Torah tells us that even if you have to lay siege on the people, but don't unnecessarily destroy the trees. Let's see it inside, okay? Text number 3. When you besiege a city for many days, waging war against it to capture it, do not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them, for from them you shall eat, and you shall not cut them down. For the tree of the field is a human. For the tree of the field is a human that you should besiege it. Meaning the Torah is asking us a question. The humans are the ones that are attacking you. It's not the trees. Don't destroy the trees unnecessarily. You should besiege and destroy your enemy. Why are you hurting humans? So the simple meaning of the verse is there's a question mark here. Is a tree a human? A tree is not a human. Don't treat the tree the way you treat your enemy. But on a deeper level, our sages tell us, right? Meaning the Torah is understood literally, pshat, but then you get deeper and deeper and you end up in the world of remez, where there are hints and teachings. You go to the word of sod, to the world of mysticism and Kabbalah. And here we take away the question mark. And we have a statement. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, a person is like a tree in the field. We have a comparison between the human being and the trees. And therefore we have many teachings throughout Judaism, many sages who have spoken about and taught and expounded upon the comparisons and the lessons that we derive from trees to human life. Let's try to figure out a few of them. Take a few minutes, try to come up with a few lessons from the trees. You can write them down at the bottom of page 7. And maybe we'll share a few of them. We'll do this quickly, 90 seconds. Try to come up with up to 5 lessons from the trees. Go ahead. Things that we learn from trees. Okay. All right. Anybody want to give any examples? Shekinah.
Yeah.
Why don't you start with one?
So they help sustain life for every sentient.
So what's the lesson for us?
The lesson is that everything we exude from our radius should be to help others survive.
We should breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. Is that what you're saying? Okay, good. So we should radiate life to others the way the trees do. Very good. Beautiful. Any others? Any other ideas? Yes, David. Okay, trees grow and trees deal with oxygen, and humans should constantly be growing, and I guess they should not forget to breathe, right? Okay, Yotam, what were you going to say?
I think similarities, not a lesson.
Okay.
Similarities, they have roots. We have roots.
Okay, that's a lesson, right? A tree that is strong is not just if it's big and beautiful, but if it has deep roots. So too, we have to not just be strong and physically, attractive, whatever it is. We should have very deep roots in order to have longevity. Okay, good, excellent. Yes, Tilly. Nourishment. Okay. Okay, good, excellent, excellent. Yes, Norbert.
Tree goes through cycles.
Okay.
And through that, it passes things off, it gets rid of them and regrows and becomes better.
I actually heard just now a beautiful teaching, beautiful metaphor. We don't experience this so much here in California, but if you go now to the East Coast, okay, you go to places that are cold, you have this brilliant, colorful autumn experience of the trees, just so beautiful. And I heard somebody was saying it's like the trees are giving themselves a pat on the back and saying, you know what, we gave you such a beautiful, clean world. We worked so hard the entire, spring and summer. And now we're going to go out with a bang into the winter, and then we'll come back for more. It's sort of like a celebration of the trees, right? It's a beautiful idea. Okay, so we have a number of ideas. I'm sure there are others as well. associated with trees. What we're going to do now is we're going to focus on finding meaning by deriving 4 lessons. And there are many more, right? If you look into the various teachings of Kabbalah and Hasidus and the commentaries regarding this holiday of Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for trees, there's probably 100 lessons that we can derive from the tree. We're going to focus on 4 with regards to attaining meaning in life. And they are based on a very, very powerful concept. Okay? A tree is different than other living things. Think about humans, animals, right? We all come from the ground. We all come from the earth, right? We all come from physical matter. But humans are not connected to their source. We wander. We go to all kinds of places. Animals as well are not connected to their source. Things that grow from the ground, and certainly the most majestic and permanent and dynamic and long-lasting of things that grow from the ground are trees, okay? So on the one hand, a tree is a very, very dynamic creature, and yet is always connected to its source, to the earth. So in that sense, what a tree represents is perfect alignment with itself, with its core. A tree is always perfectly aligned with who it is on the inside. A tree is always true to itself. Because if for a moment the tree is disconnected from the ground, that's where the life of the tree ends. Now, based upon that, we're going to focus on 4 things. We're going to focus on growth. We're going to focus on productivity. We'll focus on giving, and we'll focus on connectedness with others through relationships. Let's jump right into it, okay? Let's start with personal growth. Very interesting text over here. When we talk about personal growth. So the Torah tells us something very interesting. Text number 4. We have here, we're expounding further on the text that we had earlier regarding war. Remember the text about war and don't cut down trees, and trees are compared to people. Remember this? The Talmud discusses this in great detail. Let's see it inside. Text number 4. What is the meaning of the verse, for the tree of the field is a human? Is man actually a tree of the field? Earlier in the same verse, it is written, for from them you shall eat, and you shall not cut them down. And it is written in the next verse, however, if it is a tree that you know is not a food tree, you may destroy and cut it down. Let me just explain. There is a halachic component here. There's an element of Jewish law that cutting down a fruit tree is a much greater and more severe prohibition than cutting down a non-fruit tree. Just something practical. Let's say you're doing construction in your home, or you're doing landscaping in your yard, and that old orange tree that's been here since long before Northridge became anything where people live. You say, I don't want the orange tree anymore. You say to the gardener, get rid of this. I'm going to put a shed here. I'm going to. According to Jewish law, it's not so simple. You can't just cut down fruit trees. It's not a simple thing. There's a halachic process that you need to go through. There's a process of Jewish law, of inquiring with Jewish authorities to figure out, what can I do if I need the place where the orange tree is located? And even when it comes to war, the laws of cutting down a fruit tree are much more severe than cutting down a tree that does not bear fruit. What is the lesson here? So the Talmud continues. This indicates that there are certain trees that may be cut down, while others may not be destroyed. Namely, fruit trees may not be destroyed. How so? What does this teach us? If a Torah scholar is worthy, from them you shall eat, and you shall not cut them down. But if he is not worthy, he you may destroy and cut down. So first of all, we're going here not suddenly into scholars, moving away from regular people to scholars. And we're saying that if somehow the scholar is worthy, then you should consume from them, you should benefit from them, you should learn from them, and not cut them down, not disassociate from them. But if they're not worthy, if they don't bear fruit, if they're not worthy, then you should cut them down, which doesn't mean you should kill them, but you should disassociate from them. You should cut off your connection with them. And the way the commentaries understand this is something very, very powerful. One might think a person is a scholar. A person is an intellectual. They have a vast amount of knowledge. That automatically makes them deserving of my respect and attention. If a person has a title, they are a scholar, they're a sage, they're a professor in college, they have PhD after their name. They're a tenured professor, which means they can't even be fired, right? Right? This is the head of the political science Middle East studies department. Of course, they are to be respected and quoted, and everything they say is 100% pure and true. They have the name rabbi before their name. The title rabbi, they're a sage of Torah. Not necessarily should you eat of their fruit. Make sure they are a healthy tree. Make sure they are a healthy tree. What is the Torah referring to? A healthy tree is a tree that is constantly in the process of growing and bearing fruit. Constantly in the process of growing. If a scholar is not a person who also works on their character, who is not self-reflective, you could be the smartest, most knowledgeable Torah scholar in the world, but if you're not a mensch, if you're not self-reflective, that's not a person you want to learn from. That's a person you should be wary of. And the Torah warns us, be wary of such a scholar. Cut them down. Doesn't mean cut them down, God forbid, but cut off your connection with them. Be very careful with such a person, because sometimes with their intellectual prowess, they can fool you into thinking that everything they say is true and pure and moral, and you can go down a very dangerous path. When someone is ignorant, so you dismiss what they say. A simple person, ignorant. But when they have titles, when they have degrees, when they have letters before and after their name, you have to be very careful to make sure this is a healthy person. This is a healthy tree. Now, what does it mean to be a healthy person? What are we referring to over here? So let's turn back again. Somebody had their hand up with a question. David, you had a question? Yeah.
Are all confused about where it says we may destroy and cut it down? I thought we were talking that we should do it.
If it's a not fruit-bearing tree, then you're allowed to cut it down in war. War. Or if you want to expand and add a bedroom to your home. Okay? The issue of destruction of a tree is much less severe when it comes to a non-fruit-bearing tree. Just to share like a little insight about this fruit-bearing, the Kabbalists explain, and this is actually hinted in the verses of the Torah, that at the beginning of creation, if you look in the creation story, the original plan was that every tree should be a fruit-bearing tree. If you look in the story, it says, Eitz oisepri. God said, let there be trees that make fruit, that produce fruit. Didn't say trees that produce trees, meaning we know every tree produces other trees. It has seeds, right? Not every tree has fruit. The original story in Genesis says, let there be trees that produce fruit. What happened? How do we have so many trees that don't have fruit? So the way the Kabbalists understand what happened is that there was a sin that took place through a fruit. Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, and they were punished, and the snake was punished, and the world was punished, and the trees were punished. That many of the trees became non-fruit-bearing trees. But it's an aberration. It's not the way it's supposed to be. In fact, one of the messianic blessings, one of the predictions of the messianic era is that Ilone Srak Yasu Peres, those non-fruit-bearing trees will produce fruit. So a perfect tree, a tree the way it's supposed to be, is characterized as a fruit-bearing tree. A scholar who's living as a scholar should live is called a fruit-bearing tree, a tree that is a proper tree. Just understand that context, okay? So let's talk about what does it mean? Yes.
Yeah, so what about trees that produce food that are not fruits, but they still sustain, like
Okay.
Acorns and nuts? Are those considered in the same?
Yes, those are considered fruit in terms of the halacha of not cutting down trees unnecessarily. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay. All right. So let's understand, what does it mean for a human being to be in the category of a scholar who is worthy of learning from them, a human being who's living as a human being should live. So let's again look at the wisdom of King Solomon. Back to Ecclesiastes, text number 5, Kohelet, chapter 3. What does King Solomon tell us? He says, how many understand that the spirit of the human ascends on high, while the spirit of the beast descends to the earth? Okay? So we have here a very interesting concept. Suddenly we're being introduced to the spirit of the human and the spirit of the beast. Now, simply speaking, we're referring to animals. who walk on four legs, and therefore most of the time they're not looking up, they're looking down or they're looking forward, right? So they're looking down at the earth, versus humans who walk on two legs, so it's very easy for them to look up and to see the sky and see the stars and see the clouds. Meaning, how often does a cow notice the sky? A cow is busy looking for grass. The cow is busy looking down at the ground. It's a big stretch for a cow to lift up its head and look up at the sky. For us, it's very easy, right? You know, if you're looking forward, you just lift up your eyes. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. I can see the beauty of the heavens. On a simple level, that's what King Solomon is saying. He's contrasting humans and animals. On a deeper level, the Kabbalists explain that he's actually talking about two elements within the human being. And some of you are familiar with this. We've talked about it in many of our courses. If you've studied the book of Tanya, this is a basic tenet, the basic teaching of the Hasidic book of Tanya, that we have two drives. We have the animal drive, and we have the human, also known as the godly transcendent drive. Okay? The animal drive is the natural, instinctive, animal, primal impulse that every living creature has, including humans. Okay? The human or godly drive is what makes us unique as human beings. That we have a drive, we have something within us that is pushing us to go beyond our animal instinct and to be self-reflective, to be mindful, to be intentional, to be transcendent, to be selfless, to be giving, to be mature, to be forward-thinking. These are all uniquely human traits, and we're told it comes because of literally a drive, a piece of the divine that is placed within us, that pushes us to live in a more transcendent fashion. Okay? Now, naturally, instinctively, we express our animal drive. So if you just, as they say, hang loose, right? If you say, today, I'm going to do every impulse that comes to my mind. I don't recommend this. I certainly don't recommend this in fine company, right? Okay? Today I'm going to do every impulse that comes to mind. I'm not going to restrain myself. No impulse control for the next 24 hours. You are becoming a pure vehicle of the self-expression of the animal drive. You're practicing self-expression of the animal drive. Okay? It's natural. It doesn't take a lot of work. It means waking up in the morning and not doing anything to discipline yourself. Not doing anything to restrain yourself. It's very easy. It's very simple. It's about letting down your guard 100%. Now, it might not be so simple practically because you also have a godly drive. And that godly drive is something that you've strengthened and you've practiced and you've implemented in your life. And so some of these impulses might seem very out of line with who you think you are. But if you put that aside, it's very easy just to be an animal, to be impulsive. Attaining the self-expression of the human godly drive, it doesn't come naturally. It takes work. It takes intentionality. It takes being organized and disciplined and mature and controlling one's impulses, delaying one's gratification. And it is incredibly satisfying. Why is it incredibly satisfying? Because you are attaining self-expression, not of your animal self, or not just of your animal self, but of your higher self, of your godly self, of what the mystics argue, of what Kabbalah argues, is your truest self. And that's what it means to be a tree that grows and that bears fruit. And therefore, King Solomon says, be aware that you have two elements within you. You have two drives within you. You have the human that ascends on high, and you have the beast that descends to the earth. Let's examine this a little bit, okay? What is a human being? So, it's very interesting. In the English dictionary, there are a number of Yiddish words that have become part of the English dictionary. Can you think of any of those words? Meshugana is in Webster's dictionary. Anything else? Schlep, chutzpah, okay? And there's a few others. One of them is mensch. What does mensch mean? Literally, what does mensch mean in Yiddish? What does mensch mean? It means a person. But that's not what Webster's thinks. Let's look at Webster's for a second. Okay? Webster's is found on page 11 at the bottom. What does it say? A mensch is not just a person. It's a person of integrity and honor. And you know there's an adjective that comes with mensch? It's called being menschy. All right? You're a menschy person. You're a mensch. I'm having a menschy day. That's menchies. That's the story, right? Menchies. Okay? So it's interesting. So what is a mensch, right? A mensch is a person who acts in a noble fashion, right? Susan, she's such a mensch. My neighbor Sam, he's such a mensch. He takes in my trash cans when I forget. Such a mensch, right? Now, if you think about it, in the literal English translation, what is a mensch? A mensch is a human. Susan, she's wonderful. She's such a human. Sam, my neighbor, takes in my trash cans when I forget. He's so human. Something wrong with this, right? Because the truth is, in English, when you say someone is human, typically what is it? Ah, they messed up. They're only human, right? It's only human. Everyone's human, right? Don't expect perfection. So for some reason in Yiddish, mensch is this lofty person of integrity. And in English, the translation human is expressing the fact that at our core, we have an animal drive and we mess up, which is very interesting, right? When someone fails morally, we say they're only human. And the answer is, what is human? How do you define human, right? And perhaps what's happening here, and again, I'm getting into a theory of the etymology of mensch and human. Perhaps what's happening here is that Yiddish is a Jewish language. Yiddish is a language that developed with a Jewish perspective. And from a Jewish perspective, a human is much more than just a sophisticated animal. A human has the ability to be a mensch, to live with self-expression of their godly drive. And that's what it means to be a mensch. And therefore we say mensch is not just human with all the human failings. Mensch is a person who grows, who strives, who's a better person, who always tries to be a better person. English, and again, this is just my theory. English, the language of Western culture, and Western culture recognizes us and pushes us and drives us and encourages us and entices us to experience the self-expression of our animal drive. More pleasure, more enjoyable experiences, more hedonism, more self-centeredness, more consumerism. So therefore, what does English say? What does Western culture say? Human, you're only human. You're acting like an animal, you're only human, right? It's a different perspective. It's a different perspective. And to be like a tree, to grow, means to be a mensch. Let's see this, an interesting text over here, text number 6. Okay? There's actually an entire article on Chabad.org called On Being a Mensch. This is an important article, okay? We're quoting here from this article, Rabbi Herson. What is the Torah definition of a human? A human has the capacity for self-assessment. A human has the mental and moral capacity to override impulse. Can a dog decide to go on a diet? A human can choose to follow his moral compass instead of his physical inclination. A human can calculate consequences beyond the immediate. That is the Torah description of a human, the Torah definition of a mensch, something we should all strive for. Interestingly, the term has different connotations when used in American parlance. When a person is weak and less than noble, impulse-driven, instead of morally focused, what do we say? Listen, he's only human. In our vernacular, recognizing that a person is human is acknowledging his inherent weakness. We see a human as inherently flawed and morally feeble. We cut a guy slack because we know he can't reach a noble goal. After all, he's only human. What can you really expect from this person of flesh and blood? Think about it. The Torah Jewish term of human mensch is something to strive for, while the American human is a fallback position in case of moral failure. So, the first step in self-alignment, in being like the tree firmly rooted to your truest self, is to be a person who is self-reflective, who is not afraid to grow, who accepts the fact that on the one hand we are animalistic and we have animalistic drives, but we don't just use that as a fallback excuse. We constantly strive to be in alignment with our godly impulses. with our menshi impulses, with our ability to be more lofty and more reflective of something higher. You know, the word in Hebrew for human is Adam. And our sages point out Adam is connected to two other words. Adam is Adama. What is Adama? The earth, the ground. Okay? So a human can be very earthly, can be very lowly, can be a lowly creature, right? In fact, humans can be even more lowly than animals, because an animal, we don't expect better. An animal doing their instinctive thing is fine. That's why animals don't have to wear clothes, and animals don't have to go to the bathroom in private, right? We don't expect more of animals. When a human acts like an animal, it's horrific. It's disgusting. It's completely out of line. So Adam is Adama, lowly. But the word Adam is also Adame. Adame means I am a reflection of. Adama le'elyon. The human being has the ability to be a reflection of the divine, to live their life in the image of Hashem, in the image of the divine. That's why human life is so precious and so infinitely valuable, because we are created, as it says in Genesis, in the image of God. And so we have these two opposite extremes in the same word. Adam, lowly, earthly, or Adam le'elyon, a reflection of the divine. There's a fascinating letter that the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote many years ago, 1970s, to a convention of educators that was taking place. Jewish educators were getting together for a convention to talk about education. And the Rebbe wrote them a letter. And in the letter, he bemoans the fact that in the American education system, this is in the 70s, I think how much more so today, we educate for knowledge and for material success, right? You get into your best classes, you get into your honors, then you can go to a better high school, then you can get a good GPA, then you can get into a better college, you can get a nicer resume, you get a better job, you make more money, and you're there, right? That's what education is. And the Rebbe said, while it's important to have knowledge, and while it's important to have the ability to make a living, if that's where education ends, it's actually a very cruel endeavor. And he gave the following analogy. He said, imagine if you take an animal and you treat it like a tree, right? What does the tree do in your yard? The tree stays in one place and gets food, water, sunshine. That's it. The tree stays in one place for its entire lifetime. Imagine if you did that to your dog. Take your dog, put him in a cage. He has to stay in one place in the yard. You give him food, you give him shelter, give him some water. That's it. For the tree, it's fine. For the dog, it's cruel. Why? Because the dog has the potential to be more of a living being than a tree. A dog can run around. A dog can interact with other animals. A dog can interact with people. A dog can play frisbee. Dogs can do a lot of things. So it's cruel to treat a dog like you treat a tree. For the tree, it's fine. For the dog, it's not fair. Says the Rebbe, it's cruel to your children if you educate them to be sophisticated animals, pursuing as an end goal self-sustenance and the ability to attain and to consume as many pleasures as possible. Because a human being has much more potential than an animal. A human being has the potential for transcendence, for character development, for going out of yourself and going beyond yourself and being a light and an ambassador of goodness to the world. A human being has the ability to do this. And if you don't educate the child to do this, you are condemning them to not realizing their human potential. It's like taking an animal and treating it like a tree. Taking a human and treating it like an animal is the same thing. And so the first thing we learn from the trees is the importance of growth. And that's what brings incredible meaning. When a person is in a state of growth because they're recognizing their inner self, their true self, that is a very meaningful endeavor. Okay? So to summarize, self-expression and the meaning, pleasure, and happiness that ensues comes through self-expression of the human godly drive, through intentional personal growth, self-awareness, and impulse control. We contain an incredibly lofty soul, a neshama, a godly drive. And one of the most important steps towards experiencing meaning in life is being in alignment with that neshama and recognizing the preciousness and the gift of that neshama coming into the world. There was a great rabbi. His name was Rabbi Chaim Shaul Brook. You know Rabbi Chaim Brook from CSUN? This was his great-grandfather. Rabbi Brook is named for him. And he was a great rabbi. He was a chassid. He grew up in Russia. Later, he moved to Israel. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in Israel. And when he got a little bit older, as is the case with sometimes older people, he couldn't sleep through the night. He would have to get up and use the restroom. It happens, right? And his wife was very bothered by what he used to do. He would get up, use the restroom. Instead of going back to sleep, he would sit down at the table, wash his hands, the ritual washing, sit down at the table and learn for 20 minutes, learn Torah for 20 minutes, and then he would come back to bed. And his wife said, you're missing out on a lot of sleep, because if you do this 2-3 times a night, as it happens as you get older, you're missing out on a lot of sleep. Why can't you just come back to bed? And he said a very simple thing, a very profound thing. He says, listen, we're told that when you go to sleep, a large portion of your soul goes up to heaven. When you wake up, your soul comes back. He says, is it fair to my soul that it came all the way back into my body just to go to the bathroom? Come on. That's not a worthy journey of my soul. Obviously, there has to be a little bit of Torah study in the process as well. We all have to think about this because our soul journeyed into this world when we were born. And every day when we wake up, again, fresh, renewed with the blessing of life, and not every human being attains every single day. Some people don't wake up. Right? And we have to ask ourselves, what was the purpose of my soul journeying back into my body? This morning, somebody called me. Someone in the community called me, very distraught about the New York politics yesterday. And specifically, she was very distraught because she said, I'm online and I'm reading on social media these horrific, terrible posts that Muslims in New York are posting that soon we're going to chase the Jews out of New York and we're going to beat you up and we're going to destroy you. We're going to chase you out of this country. Terrible things. And this is really driving me crazy. I don't know what to do. I'm so upset. I'm so stressed out. And I said to her, who asked you to read it? Just because Ahmed or Muhammad decided to have verbal diarrhea online, you have to go and drink it. You have to consume it. This is what he wants you to do. He wants you to get all worked up because of the horrific things that he's writing. I said to her this morning, your soul came back into your body. You said, thank you, God, for giving me back my soul. You think your soul came back into your body so you should read Ahmed's diatribes on Facebook? Your soul came back into your body because you are a pillar of light in this world. You're an ambassador of Hashem and goodness and godliness. I'm not saying you shouldn't know the news, but you have to read the comments. You have to read the diatribes, the anti-Semitism. And she says, but it's a reality. We have to know what's happening in the world. I said to her, tell me, do you drive every day? Yes. Do you spend 2 hours every day looking at horrific pictures of what people's bodies look like after car accidents? Well, I sure hope you don't do that. Why don't you do it? It's a reality. It's out there. It happens. You don't do it because there's no reason for it. You know that it's dangerous to drive. You know that you have to put on your seatbelt, and then you move on and you drive. If you were the ambulance driver and you have to deal with the accidents, if you work for CHP, these are things you have to deal with. And you need a lot of therapy and a lot of psycho strengthening to deal with that kind of stuff. But you're just a regular person. Get into the car and drive and put on your seatbelt. We are not equipped to deal with this kind of disgusting diatribe for hours every single day. And they give it to us and they do it to us because it destroys us. And that's not why our neshama came into the world today. My neshama came into the world to interact with light and to be positive and to be proud and to be strong and to be forward-looking. And this is what we have to think about every day. This is what it means to grow. To grow means to ascend upwards and to realize that we have to live the self-expression of our godly selves. So that's step one. That's step one. Okay, step two, productivity. Productivity, okay? Let's look at text number 7. Text number 7, we're told that the Torah tells us, as I said before, the original plan is all trees are to be fruit-bearing trees, okay? Text number 7, page 15, a tree by definition is meant to produce fruit. Like the verse says, a tree that produces fruit. That means it grows fruit in a way where its seed is within it, meaning that each fruit contains seeds that can grow into another tree. We're going to skip this next paragraph because it's not relevant. We're just going to stay focused over here. So the next element of a tree is that a tree is productive. Okay? As I said before, the original plan Kabbalah teaches us was that all trees should be fruit-bearing. What does this mean in terms of the pursuit of meaning in life? It is much more meaningful to be productive than to be a consumer. Consumption versus production. Did I lose the thing again? Hopefully it'll come back up. Okay? Consumption versus production. Let's think about it for a second. Many people spend a lot of time online, tremendous amount of time online. Most people online are passive consumers. When you are a passive consumer online, someone here before said it's their example of pleasure, not meaningful. I think that was you, right? Pleasure, not meaningful. But the truth is, even the pleasure is temporary. And after spending too much time online as a passive consumer, it's actually incredibly depressing. It's incredibly depressing. Even if all the things that you watch are not horrible anti-Semitic videos, even if it's just cute, entertaining monkeys jumping around, you do that for an hour or two. It's like, what on earth am I wasting my time doing, right? Because you're a consumer. Now, by the way, there are really talented creators of this content, right? Those are talented people. Those are smart people. And they're making good money through your consumerism, right? And in that sense, their life has purpose and they're producing. They're being productive, right? I'm not saying all of us should become online creators. It's not necessarily the most meaningful endeavor, but this idea that a human being should not just be a passive consumer. A human being has to be productive. Like the trees, a tree is a tree when it produces fruit, when it is bringing something into the world, when it is expanding goodness in the world. A human being finds meaning and finds self-expression when they are producing, when they are making a difference, when they're making things happen in the world. You know, when it came to the subject of retirement, this was an area where the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a very strong perspective. Even if you're in a position financially to retire, it's not healthy as a human to stop being productive. And so retiring, he said, is to be avoided if possible. And if you're going to do it, be very intentional about what you're going to do with your time. And make sure you're being productive. Because the second you stop being productive is when you begin to wither away. And this happens to people all over the world. People think, I'm going to retire, and I'm going to have all the time in the world. I'm going to get to travel, do all my hobbies, I'm going to read all my books. And very quickly, very often, it's a very sad thing. They wither away. They lose their personality. Their health begins to deteriorate. Because the nature of a human being, as the expression is in Hebrew, Adam la'amal yulad, a person feels meaningful. A person feels purposeful when they are productive, when they are producing in the world, when they are making a difference in the world. Even if it's just for yourself. We're not talking now about helping others. That we'll get to soon. Just being someone who produces something meaningful in my existence. That itself is an important human need. And it's necessary to have a sense of meaning and happiness, right? In fact, the Talmud tells us that if you have a choice between having more given to you as a gift or less that you attained on your own, it's much more meaningful to have less that you attained on your own. You know, if you think about it, you know, we were going through some old clothing in the boxes, old clothing of our children. We found this cute little sweater that my mother-in-law knitted for my oldest daughter, Mushka, when she was like a year old, right? Now, I'm thinking to myself, my mother-in-law is a busy woman. She works a full-time job. Why did she have to sit for weeks and weeks and weeks and knit a sweater? Why couldn't she go to China or Amazon and buy a sweater? $20, you buy a sweater, right? The answer is you can't compare something that she produced with her own hands and then she put it onto her granddaughter. That feeling of joy and pleasure and meaning and purpose. I produced something, I created something. This is mine, right? We can all relate to this. But still, what society pushes us to do is consume. Consume, consume, consume. Be a passive consumer. Think about in a relationship, right? So often what breaks down relationships is each of the two parties wants to be a consumer. I want to receive from you. I want to receive from the other. I don't want to take the initiative. I don't want to work hard and come up with ideas and try to make things happen. I just want to receive, right? But when you're a receiver, you don't feel human. You're not living your full human potential, right? Let's look at text number 9. We see this expressed very powerfully. Text number 9, a very small text, right? A person prefers one measure of their own over 9 measures of their friends, right? You much more prefer to have one measure. Working again? One measure that you produced on your own versus 9 measures that someone gave to you as a gift, right? Okay. Now, taking this now a step further. So far, we've talked about self-awareness and growth. Then we talked about productivity. But now we're going to say, take it a step further, a very important step towards meaning and the happiness that ensues is a productivity that benefits others. Living in service of others, giving to others is an incredible human endeavor that is necessary in order for a person to experience that joy and pleasure of being a meaningful existence. Let's look at text number 10, where we see this in the tree, okay? A story from the Talmud when they were taking leave of one another, page 19. Rabbi Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, Master, give me a blessing. Rabbi Yitzchak said to him, I will tell you a parable. The situation is comparable to one who was walking through a desert and who was hungry, tired, and thirsty. He found a tree whose fruits were sweet, whose shade was pleasant, and a stream of water flowed beneath it. Page 20. He ate from the fruits of the tree, drank from the water in the stream, and sat in the shade of the tree. When he wished to leave, he said, Tree, tree, with what shall I bless you? If I say to you that your fruits should be sweet, your fruits are already sweet. If I say that your shade shall be pleasant, your shade is already pleasant. If I say that a stream of water should flow beneath you, a stream of water already flows beneath you. So what am I going to bless you with? Rather, I will bless you as follows. May it be God's will that all the saplings that they plant from you should be like you. This is what the rabbi is saying to his friend. So it is with you. With what shall I bless you? If I bless you with Torah, you already have Torah. If I bless you with wealth, you already have wealth. If I bless you with children, you already have children. Rather, may it be God's will that your offspring shall be like you. So what is meaningful to a tree and what is meaningful to a human being? When you produce, when you give to others, when you produce something meaningful in the world that makes a difference in this world. Let's look at this from a modern psychological perspective. This concept of existential mattering, a very powerful point. Text number 11. There is great comfort in believing that your life and actions matter in the grand scheme of things. This conviction is referred to as existential mattering and is a strong component of the experience of meaning in life. While the concept of existential mattering often evokes images of famous and infamous people who have done extraordinary things in their lives, many people gain a sense of mattering through avenues more easily traversed. Research shows that feeling that you have made a positive influence on others is unsurprisingly almost always associated with the belief that your life is meaningful. Existential mattering that is often rooted in the sense that you matter to others, from helping strangers in need and providing social support to loved ones, simply being a reliable friend. So what are we saying over here? Obviously, there are meaningful activities, productive activities that we can do on our own. One of you mentioned before when we talked about pleasurable and meaningful activities, study, intellectual pursuits, for sure Torah study, right? What they're arguing here is that as much as you find meaning and purpose and pleasure in study, but when you take that to, let's say, studying with others, giving to others, sharing with others, the sense of meaning goes up exponentially, right? There is a natural, from the godly soul perspective, there is a human need to be in service of others, to influence others, to share with others. There's a famous story that Rabbi Akiva, the famous sage Rabbi Akiva, was imprisoned by the Romans and later executed for the study of Torah. One of his students, the famous Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's buried in Meron, whose yahrzeit is Lag BaOmer, the author of the Zohar, the famous seminal book of Kabbalah, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came to visit his teacher in prison as he was waiting to be punished by the Romans. And he began apologizing to his teacher because Rabbi Shimon had pushed Rabbi Akiva to teach and to teach and to teach, and eventually he was caught by the Romans. And so he says, I feel bad, I caused you so much pain and suffering. Rabbi Akiva says to him, when a mother cow nurses her calf, more than the calf wants to nurse, the mother wants to give. He says, as much as you wanted to learn Torah, I wanted to teach Torah even more. Don't apologize. Don't apologize. My greatest joy and pleasure, he says, was my ability to share with you and to teach you, and you will then take it to others, right? This sense of the ability to give, the opportunity to give to others, is a very, very important human experience. You know, it's very interesting. King David was a very great king of the Jewish people, and he enacted many things to try to make Jewish society better, try to make life in Israel better for the Jewish people. He came up with an idea one time. Today it's called socialism. He said, I'm going to collect all the wealth in the country, and I will divide it equally among all the people, and we will banish poverty from the land of Israel. There will no longer be poor people. Amazing, right? And God said, it's not a good idea. Why not? Why not? Maybe he would do socialism right, not like these other Mishigoyim who are going to mess it up, right? Maybe he'll do it right. God said, whether you do it right or wrong, it's not the way of the world, because there is a powerful human need to give to others. And if there isn't a need, then there's nothing to give. The reason why there are people in need is because God wants to give those who have the sense of meaning and purpose that comes through giving. In fact, an interesting thing, when you give charity to help a poor person, you're supposed to give them what they need and just a little bit more. Why? So that they can give charity. Give them the ability to give as well. Give the poor person the pleasure of giving to somebody else. Okay, let's see these very powerful texts inside. Text number 13. This is King David trying to introduce socialism. Text number 13. King David said to God, Master of the universe, establish equity in your world by making rich and poor the same, right? Free buses, free grocery stores, right? God replied, if such were the case, text number 13, who would preserve kindness and truth? If all were rich or all were poor, who would be able to do acts of kindness? What a powerful moment. When it comes to charity, text number 14, everyone is obligated to give charity. Even a poor person who relies on charitable support themselves must give from what they receive. It says God created Olam Chesed, a world whose foundation is kindness. You look around the world and you see so many people lacking. So many people lacking in health. So many people lacking in their material needs. And you ask yourself, where is the world of kindness? And the answer is, it's right there. The reason why God created a world that's lacking anything is so that those who have can experience the joy and the depth and the meaning of giving, of sharing with others. It's a very, very powerful thing, right? There's this beautiful story, very, very beautiful story. There was a chassid. His name was Reb Mendel Futterfass. You may have heard of him. I've mentioned him many times. He was a great chassid, and later in life, he practiced real self-sacrifice on behalf of helping others. He risked his life, and he almost lost his life in the endeavor of helping Jews escape from Russia after World War II. He helped many hundreds of Jews escape, including my grandparents, my wife's grandparents, and many others. And he was eventually caught by the Soviets, and he was sent to Siberia for 10 years. He suffered a lot, practically. And he loved people. He loved helping people. He loved helping the poor. He loved educating the ignorant. He loved making people's lives better. And somebody once asked him, where did this come from? Where did this desire to help others, where did it come from? He said, it actually came from an experience that I had when I was 5 years old. I was 5 years old in Cheder, in the shtetl. And we had already learned the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and we were learning how to write the letters in script, right? Hebrew has a block letters and it has script. We're learning how to write in script. Now, so everyone had to have a writing instrument. We would have a fountain pen, and everyone had a little container with ink to fill up your fountain pen. And one day there was a boy who was out of ink. And he turned to his friend Moshe, and he says to Moshe, can I borrow some of your ink? And Moshe says, no, you should have brought your own ink. Okay? The teacher noticed this. He didn't say anything. Later, in the course of the class, the teacher turns to Moshe and says, Moshe, I just wrote on the board in script the Hebrew alphabet. I want you to tell me the names of the letters. Moshe was very smart. He's like, oh, this is easy. I know this. He points to the first letter. He says, that's Aleph. Teacher says, no, it's not Aleph. Okay. Bet. No, it's not Bet. Gimel. No, it's not Gimel. Like, what? He says, no. The first letter is that Moshe should give his friend ink if his friend needs ink. The second letter is that Moshe has to give his friend ink if his friend needs ink. The third letter is Moshe has to give his friend ink if his friend needs ink. The ABCs, the Aleph Beis of Yiddishkeit, the ABCs of Judaism, his teacher said, is helping another person, is helping another Jew. There's no point in all of your intellectual attainments if when someone asks you for a simple favor, can I borrow a little bit of ink? And you can give it to him and there's no sweat off your back. And you say, no, you should have had your own. You're missing the ABCs of Judaism. The ABCs of Judaism is being productive on somebody else's behalf, on helping another person. And he says, this stayed with me for the rest of my life. And that's why I'm so passionate, he said, about helping others. Facilitating the opportunity for someone else to feel productive and to feel meaningful is also very powerful. For this, I heard another incredible story. You may have seen this beautiful book that came out about 10 years ago, written by Rabbi Tolushkin. It's a book about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's called Rebbe. It's a beautiful book. Very, very beautiful book. Rabbi Tolushkin is an American rabbi, intellectual, author. And he tells a story about his father. His father was actually a Chabad chassid. He was a Chabad member, a member of the Chabad community, and he was a professional CPA. In fact, he was the accountant of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And when the Rebbe started his organization in 1950, and they started to raise money and open up branches all over the world, they had an accountant. Who was the accountant? His name was Shlomo Telushkin. Shlomo Telushkin. This was his name. And he was excellent. He was amazing. In the 1980s, Shlomo Telushkin suffered from a terrible stroke. And he was in the hospital, and it was very severe. It was very serious. And he said every day, the family would get a phone call from the Rebbe's assistant, from Rabbi Krinsky, a daily check-in. How is Shlomo doing? How is his health? Fine. And they got used to it every day, a call from the Rebbe's office. One day they get a call. Rabbi Krinsky says to Shlomo Telushkin's son, the Rebbe has an accounting question for your father. And he says, I thought to myself, the Rebbe knows that my father is very ill. My father is no longer able to think straight. He's no longer able to read. He's no longer able to see properly. His mind is not working properly. Why is the Rebbe ignoring the daily check-in that he's aware of, and he has an accounting question for Shlomo? So he says to Rabbi Krinsky, my father is not really in a position to answer questions. Rabbi Krinsky says, does the Rebbe not know what's happening with your father? We were sitting at a meeting and a question came up and the Rebbe said, let's ask Shlomo. So I'm calling you and I want you to ask your father the question. He says, what's the question? And it was a pretty simple question. He turns to his father, he asks his father the question. His father looks up. He gets a look of clarity in his eyes. And he says, oh, simple. A, B, and C is the answer. Very simple. And suddenly it dawned on Rabbi Telushkin, what was the Rebbe doing? Here you have a man who lived his whole life using his mind to study Torah, to teach others, to have a successful professional life. And suddenly that ability is robbed from him. And he becomes a broken man. And the Rebbe decided, we have a question here, which I believe he'll be able to answer. Let's give him the opportunity to be productive. Let's give him the opportunity to make a difference in somebody else's life. And so the third aspect that we're discussing here is the importance of not just being productive as an end in and of itself, but in the service of others. To be a tree that produces fruit and whose fruit are like the tree itself. And this brings us finally to the fourth element. So what did we talk about so far? We talked about growth. We talked about self-expression of the godly soul. We talked about the importance of productivity. Never stop being useful, never stop producing. We talked about the importance of producing on behalf of others, of making a difference in the lives of others. And finally, we have a very, very powerful idea also connected with trees, but a very important human need, and that is the need of human connection. Okay? And this is something that I think is so powerful because, for some people it comes very naturally to be social, to interact with others. They're outgoing, they're extroverted. But for those of you who are introverted, being with other people can sometimes be very uncomfortable. It can be almost painful, right? You just want to get away from it. But there, at the same time, Judaism teaches us there is a human need to be connected with others. And this is a very lofty and important endeavor. First of all, let's begin with text number 15 from a psychological perspective. Text 15, page 25. If you ask people what their most significant sources of meaning in life are, they perhaps unsurprisingly list their close relationships. That's because one of the pillars of a meaningful life is a sense of belonging. When people feel like they belong, according to psychologists Mark Leary and Roy Baumeister, it's because they're in relationships with others on mutual care. There's a very interesting thing. You talk about trees. So the most powerful, long-living trees, the tallest trees in the world are what? The redwoods, sequoias, the redwoods, right? But let's talk about the redwoods. Redwoods are very, very tall trees, hundreds of feet in the air. They can live sometimes for thousands of years. It's an incredible thing. And yet, surprisingly, redwoods have very shallow roots. The average roots of the redwood is 12 to 15 feet. So how do they last? How are they so strong with all the winds and everything? And the answer is that although they don't grow deep into the ground, but they grow out horizontally. And if there are other redwoods around, they lock arms, so to speak, or they lock roots with each other, and they hold on to and they support each other. A redwood's roots will grow outwards 60 to 80 feet, interlocking with other trees, and they provide each other with support. And in that sense, human beings are very much like redwoods. We very much need that interlocking support to be there for each other. It's a very Jewish thing. It's a very Jewish thing. You have any type of personal experience, you include others, right? In Judaism, this idea that a couple wants to get married all by themselves on the beach in Hawaii with nobody around. You can't do a Jewish ceremony. A Jewish wedding ceremony needs a minyan. It requires a minyan, which means 10. There have to be 10 Jews there, right? A person experiences a terrible loss. You're sitting Shiva, God forbid. You have to be with others. You have to open your home, let others in, have prayer services, because there is a constant need to have this human interaction. Just an interesting side point about the redwoods. I was looking this up. Another thing that allows redwoods to live for so long is they have a very thick bark, up to 12 inches, and they do not produce flammable resin. Many trees have a flammable resin so that when fires come, they easily catch on fire. I think there's a lesson here. As human beings, we have to have a thick skin and not be vulnerable every time someone throws an emotional spark your way. Don't be so flammable. Someone threw something at you, somebody offended you. Have a thick skin. Don't be so flammable. Being flammable is self-destructive. Just a side point from the Redwoods. But getting back to the idea of human connection. So it's interesting when we talk about the creation of the human being. Okay, so it says, text number 16a in the book of Genesis, God formed the human from the dust of the earth, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living being. Typically, we think of a living being like all other creatures. The animal is a living being, the cow is a living being, the tree is a living being, the roaches are living beings, the humans are living beings. Onkelos, the famous translator and commentary on the Torah, what does he say? How does he translate living being? He focuses on the human ability to communicate with others, to speak. Look at Onkelos, text 16b on page 26. God created man dust from the earth, and he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life, and the human became a speaking spirit. Why does he focus on speaking? So the explanation that's given is that through speech, we develop relationships with other human beings. We can develop meaningful connections with other people. And Onkelos is arguing that what the Torah is telling us is that what makes a human being a living being is when they cultivate and they develop meaningful social connections. Maimonides tells us in his famous Guide for the Perplexed, there are creatures in the world who are happy to live on their own, to live in solitude. It's not healthy or natural for a human being. What does Maimonides say? Text number 17. Human beings are social by nature, and their nature compels them to gather together with others. They are not like other living creatures, which have no necessity to congregate. Rather, their nature requires social gathering as an absolute necessity. So another element that we learn from the trees, very, very necessary to find meaning and happiness in human life, is working on developing those human connections. I want to share with you now a story that I recently came across, an incredible story. Many people are aware that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, despite the fact that he was part of a Hasidic family, he didn't have many close relatives, right? He himself came from a family of three. One of his brothers died without children. Another one of his brothers had one child and one grandchild. So from his own side, the Rebbe had one niece, right? From his wife's side, the Rebbe had one nephew. It was a very small family, very, very small family, which is interesting. Another family member, which many people don't know about, is the Rebbe had a first cousin, one first cousin. His father's brother's daughter. Her name was Zelda Schneerson. She lived in Israel. And she moved to Israel after the war with her parents. Her father was very, very ill. She was a young woman. She was a poet. She was a person who wrote poetry. And her father was very ill, and she devoted herself to taking care of her parents. And she nursed her father for many, many years until he passed away. And then she began taking care of her mother, and her mother got sick, and she took care of her mother. And by the time her mother died, she was 35 years old. And she writes a poem how the youth, the fountain of youth, has been taken from her, and she has nothing to live for. And she started writing letters to her cousin, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who by this point was a famous person. And there's a beautiful series of communications back and forth between the Rebbe and this young woman. Eventually, she met a wonderful husband, a man by the name of Chaim. She gets married, and she was incredibly happy. We see poems and letters from her about how happy she is, how they're like literally meant for each other. And then sadly, after 10 years of marriage, Chaim had a heart attack and died. And again, she's heartbroken. She's despondent. She's depressed. She feels trapped. She doesn't have friends. She spent her entire life taking care of her parents. And then finally, she had her husband. And now she has nothing. And she writes a letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe writes to her a beautiful letter where he talks about this idea that human beings require social interaction. And that it is terrible for her to be all by herself without others to interact with. And the Rebbe says, I acknowledge the fact that at this point, at your age, with your personality, it's hard for you to get out there and make friends. You know, the woman is almost 50 years old. She never really spent time in social circles. She was busy with family. Suddenly, I'm going to go out to the bars. I'm going to go dancing and making friends. How's this going to work? But the Rebbe says to her, it is crucial to do this. He said it is something which initially is very difficult and very painful and almost scary, anxiety-ridden. And he compares it to swimming. He says, imagine a person who can't swim. They jump into the water, they feel out of control, they're scared, I'm drowning. But eventually you learn how to swim, and it becomes an incredibly freeing and pleasurable experience. He says to her, it's the same thing with social interaction. For you right now, it's very frightening, it's very scary. But you should know if you will learn how to do this, if you will push yourself to do it, you will experience tremendous joy and freedom. It's amazing. The Rebbe is writing to his cousin a beautiful letter. And then he says to her, here's my suggestion. Very practical suggestion. He says to her, there's an organization in Israel that helps youth at risk. And there are many young women involved with this organization who have turned their life around, but they're not able to go back home. They need to live somewhere in a communal environment with some supervision. I want you to offer your home and your services as a place where these young women can live, and you will supervise them. You will be like the dormitory mother and take care of them. And this is exactly what she did. She got connected with this organization. Her home became a place where these young women would come and spend a couple of years as they got their life together. And they became known as Zelda's girls. The many, many scores of young women that she helped to influence over all these years. And these human interactions, these social interactions, brought her a sense of tremendous joy and meaning. And for me, this was such a powerful message because it's not easy. For some people, it's easy to go out there, be with others. It's a natural thing. For some people, it's hard. It's painful. You just want to be by yourself. And the Rebbe says this metaphor, it's like swimming. At first, it's scary, but eventually it's an amazing, freeing experience. Okay, so that's the fourth element here. We talked about the four areas. We talked about growth, self-improvement. We talked about productivity. We talked about being in the service of others. And finally, cultivating meaningful relationships. And so, friends, with this, we have concluded our opening discussion of this fascinating course. I just want to share with you, we are just getting started. Today, we just began to scratch the surface, certainly from a depth and spirituality perspective. You know, when it comes to pleasure, to physical pleasure, you can say the more you have, the lower you have to go. It's a descending staircase that goes lower and lower and lower. When it comes to meaningful endeavors, meaningful pursuits, it's an ascending, never-ending journey going higher and higher. And so next week, we're going to dig deeper. And we're going to say, although we discussed in lesson 1 that these 4 things are the key to attaining a sense of meaning, but that was really not really the most important thing. Really, there's going to be something much deeper. And every week, we're going to dig deeper and more meaningful and deeper into the wisdom of the Torah until eventually, after 6 weeks, we're going to be living very, very beautiful, meaningful lives. So thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure. Hopefully, you'll join us for the entire journey. And we'll see you next week. Sei gesund. Take care. My pleasure.